Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd try to say something about the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus and his view on death, because it's super interesting. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Okay, so what Epicurus believed was that the mental distress or anxiety to which we humans are often susceptible can be traced back to, among other things, but maybe most importantly, our fear of death. That's to say, what Epicurus noticed was that the topic of the destiny of our soul after death, or the prospect of facing punishment in an afterlife, or even simply the belief that death is the end of all sensation or annihilation itself, all causes people great psychological consternation. And he astutely perceived that people go to great lengths to try to either postpone death by struggling for wealth and power, or forget its inevitability by immersing themselves in endless work and activity. Okay, but here's the thing. Epicurus believed that we will prevail over our fear of death not by thinking that we'll never die or by avoiding the issue as long as possible, but by learning to think about death correctly. That is, by coming to see that death itself is actually not a bad thing at all. That death, as he says, is nothing to us. And so, for this reason, there's nothing to worry about. Okay, but let's get into some of the details here. Okay, so when he says that death is nothing to us, what does he mean exactly? Well, actually, Epicurus's argument here is pretty simple and straightforward. You see, for him, the feeling of pleasure is the only good thing in life. And the feeling of pain is the only bad thing. And they are the sources of our happiness and our anxiety, respectively. Okay, but these feelings of pleasure and pain, are only things that we experience through sensation, right? Okay, but now, what's death? Well, for Epicurus, death is the complete absence of any sensation. So notice it follows, therefore, that if death is the absence of all sensation, then somebody who's dead experiences no feelings at all, no pleasure or pain whatsoever. Well, okay then, what Epicurus is asking us is how can a condition in which there is absolutely no sensation, and so nothing good or bad for us, be one worth fearing? It can't. So being dead is nothing that we have any reason to be anxious about. Okay, now it might still be tough for us to get our mind around this because we might still be thinking in terms of our own non-existence that is our death. In other words, it's the possessive use of our non-existence that gives us the impression that we'll somehow still be around in death. But for Epicurus, that's just not the case. When we die, we no longer exist. So our non-existence is not ours. In other words, for Epicurus, there's something misguided about asking the question, what will happen to me when I'm dead? Because, well, there simply is no me, no I, after death. And again, if there's no me to experience anything, and strictly speaking, no experience whatsoever, then why worry about death? That's what Epicurus is saying. Okay, well, it's interesting. So, Lucretius, an Epicurean poet of the later Roman era, provides an additional argument in support of Epicurus's conclusion that death is nothing to us, and it's sometimes referred to as the symmetry argument. So here Lucretius attempts to convince us that the non-existence constituted by death is nothing bad to us by getting us to look back on the period of non-existence before we were born. This is what he asks. He says, we don't think it's a bad thing for us not to exist during this very long period before our lives began. So then, why should we believe that the non-existence succeeding our lives, that is, death, is any worse? Okay, but if that was a bit too quick, let me try to put it another way. So clearly, nothing about the time before we were born disturbed us because we didn't feel or sense or experience anything, right? Well, Lucretia says that by parity of reasoning, nothing can disturb us when our lives are over either, when we're dead, because we also don't feel or sense or experience anything. In other words, if we were indifferent to our non-existence before we were born, then why shouldn't we also be indifferent to the non-existence that is our death? Okay. Well, so ultimately, like Epicurus, Lucretius thinks that if we really internalize this Epicurean idea that death is nothing to us because only pain is bad and a dead person can feel or experience nothing at all, then we'll completely lose our fear, for example, of what may happen to our bodies after we die or of any sort of judgment or punishment in an afterworld. Okay, but I have to say, however, that as much as Lucretius agrees with Epicurus, he also goes on to consider a really important objection against Epicurus's position. He thinks Epicurus's argument misses an important point. What Lucretius says is that the real reason that we think death is bad for us is not because anything bad can happen to us in death, but because it deprives us of good things that we would otherwise have had. Things we would have taken pleasure in or gone on taking pleasure in. You know, things like coming home to our welcoming husband or wife, or being kissed by our children. Many of us, that is, believe that our lives would be importantly incomplete if we were deprived of certain goods or forms of enjoyment. So really, it's this fear of incompleteness, Lucretius suggests, that doesn't seem to be properly dealt with by Epicurus's argument that in death we actually experience nothing at all. Okay, now Epicurus does have a response to this though, although he doesn't seem to express it directly. But nevertheless, I think he has a profound point in mind here. So what is it? Okay, well, basically his position is to deny that the enjoyments of which death deprives us would have made us any happier. But that's just way too quick. So what's the idea here? Well, okay, let me first try to give Epicurus's argument, but then try to broaden it a bit. Make it more accessible, maybe. Okay, so why does Epicurus think that death would not deprive us of the pleasures that would make us happier? Okay, well, for this to make sense, we have to understand something. We have to understand that for Epicurus, the greatest pleasure and the ultimate goal in life is the complete absence of physical pain and mental distress. And that once this condition, this state of tranquility has been reached, it cannot be increased or made better. In other words, once we've reached this state, we have everything required for our happiness. So, importantly then, more time can't give us anything that we do not already have. So, that's why Epicurus would say then that this pleasure, this ultimate goal, if achieved, does not make a longer life any better, any more pleasant than a shorter life. Epicurus's response to Lucretius then would be that so long as we've achieved the total absence of pain and distress, we've lived a complete life, even if that life has been cut short and so deprived of certain goods and enjoyments. Okay, now maybe another way of putting all this is that for Epicurus, it's not the quantity of life that matters. No, it's the quality. If we've lived a period of time with real quality, then that's just another way of saying that things were as perfect as they could have been. And so more time, quantity, doesn't make anything better. As Epicurus himself says, infinite time contains no greater pleasure than does finite time. So for him, there is a way of reaching a kind of happiness that will make our life complete, no matter how long it lasts or doesn't last. And if we can achieve this, then death can't rob us of anything that we don't have. And so, once again, there's no reason to fear it. Bye for now.